Hi, everybody. Welcome to this beautiful evening, the Death Over Tea. I just want to welcome everyone to this beautiful space. I have an exciting and lovely speaker with us this evening. Her name is Karen Hunt. I'm going to just give you a little bit of a bio about her. I think that she's actually quite shy in her explanation of her nursing career and her end-of-life doula career, but I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to our lovely speaker, Karen, and then she will take it over and talk for about 10 or 15 minutes. But Karen Hunt is a certified end-of-life doula through Doula Givers International and has a proficiency badge from NEDA, which is the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance. She holds an active RN BSN license and is the founder of the Doula of the Sacred Canyons in Silverado Canyon in California. Karen's life experiences have prepared her to assist and advocate for those facing the final journey. Her first career in nursing led to a position as a labor and delivery nurse, serving to bring life into the world. And this experience would later influence her practice as a hospice case manager and then as an end-of-life doula, with the outcome of enhancing her ability to support, guide, and honor the sacred flow of the dying process. I am so truly honored to introduce Karen Hunt to speak and share her experience, and want to invite everyone to ask questions at the end. But for now, I would just love to introduce Miss Karen. Thanks for coming, Karen.
Thank you so much, Christine. I'm honored that you asked me, and it takes a village, doesn't it? And it's just so nice to have us all here. You know, we're the village, and what beautiful women we have here tonight. This is just great. I'm always honored and always interested in talking about death and dying. And somebody mentioned that they like talking about death and dying, and I do too. I have a quote that I wanted to start with. And by the way, the topic that I'm saying this for this particular speech or talk is that I'm going to cover everything you wanted to know about hospice, but we're afraid to ask. And later on you can ask. That's the beauty of it. But I have a quote from Vladimir Nabokov, and he was a Russian-born American novelist, and he said, "Life is a great surprise. I do not see why death should not be an even greater one." So we all, well, not we all, but some of us have a lot of fear about dying, and I think that's the beauty of hospice is we help people through education to understand what the process is. I can't tell anybody what it's like to die because I haven't, but I can tell people what I've witnessed other people go through. So it's, like I said, an honor. So a little bit of history about hospice. The word hospice is actually Latin. It comes from a Latin word, rather, hospitum, which means hospitality or place of rest and protection for the ill and the weary. And the very first hospice was believed to have originated in Malta, which is over in Europe. And that was in 1065, a long time ago. And what happened over there is the monks and other people in the church would help the ill, would care for the ill and the dying traveling to the Holy Land. And then in modern times, we had a wonderful woman. Her name was Dame Cicely Saunders. And she was over in England, and she felt very strongly that people were not being taken care of, that were having pain. And she was born in, believe it or not, she was born in 1918, long time ago. And she really fought. She became a nurse, and then she became a doctor. And so she started the whole movement. She started the palliative care movement and the hospice movement. So that's in modern times. And she was responsible for the first hospice that was built in 1967 in London at St. Christopher's Hospice. And the first freestanding hospice was here in Connecticut in the United States. And that was a long time ago. We don't have as many freestanding hospices because guess what? Most people want to die at home. They don't want have to be don't want to move somewhere else. They want to die at home, surrounded by their family if they can. And then I also wanted to tell you that the federal government did not start paying for hospice until 1983. So just a little bit of history there. Now, Christine told you a little bit of my history, but what I wanted to tell you is, as a small child, when people would talk about death, I had a very strange response when they would talk about it, and I would get very excited, and I would say that I can't wait to die. And people would say, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Oh, the place you go to is just, it's so beautiful. Heaven is great, and I can't wait until my time comes." So it's no, and I think I was 4 or 5 years old when I used to do that, and I got such odd reactions from people, but you can see my journey really started way back when. So in my early 20s, I became a nurse in labor and delivery, and I was also a Lamaze instructor, and I did that for many years. And so I learned all about the different stages of labor. I learned all about, um, being pregnant and all those different things. And it just really prepared me in my 40s when I became a hospice nurse. I was just shocked at the similarity. People don't realize the similarities. What do you think is the first thing that a pregnant mother asks when she finds out she's pregnant? One of the first things she asks is, "Oh, when is my due date?" So it's the time. She wants to know when she's going to have the baby. What do you think the first thing is when somebody finds out that they have a terminal illness, and no longer the treatment is no longer effective? They want to know how much time they have. So there's some similarities between both. The next thing was the transitional period. There's a transitional period that occurs in labor and delivery. And we have women that are going along, they're doing okay with their contractions, and then suddenly there's kind of um, this area that's more difficult for them. And sometimes their personalities change. People who are mild mannered and don't ever swear might start swearing. There's this transitional thing. I'll never forget this one woman. She was a concert violinist with the Cleveland Orchestra. That's where I'm from originally, Cleveland, Ohio. She asked us to bring her a huge bowl of ice. We didn't know what she was going to do with it, and she lifted it up and dumped it over her head, and it just went everywhere. You just never know what you're going to get. And during transition for people who are dying, sometimes there's a change in their personality as well. And I remember one gentleman that was going through that period, and he would tell me about vivid dreams he was having. Some of you might have experienced this with the vivid dreams. They're um, very telling. And he said he kept dreaming about being on a fence, and he didn't know which way to go, to the right or to the left. And sometimes there comes a time when you're not quite sure if you're ready yet or not. And it's just a progress. It's just progress. It just takes time. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of a team and a village that helps people go through that. And that I'm able to say, "Oh yes, I remember this one gentleman that experienced that. And let me share with you what happened with him." So that's one thing. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about is the nesting process. So when a woman finds out she's pregnant, a lot of times she runs around and does things that maybe is not normal for her. Cleaning out closets she hasn't looked at in years, getting everything ready, getting ready for the birth of that baby. And we see the same thing going on when it comes to somebody who's dying, getting things in order. What I wanted to talk to you about, which I think is so important, is we don't always have enough time to help people get ready, because we have a lot of fear in our country about dying, and it isn't something we talk about. Other countries do talk about it, and if we talked about it when children were little and introduced them to it, I think things would be a little bit different, that this is a natural process. The birth is natural, death is natural too. So We don't have enough time. And actually, I will tell you that on average, a person is on hospice for about 40 days. 40 days is not enough time to get complicated symptoms under control. 40 days is not enough time to say goodbye to all the people that you need to say goodbye to. It's not enough time to get all your affairs in order. So, wherever I go, I could be standing in a grocery store, and if the topic of death comes up, I'll be right there talking about it and talking about hospice. So, so again, in order to get everything taken care of, we need enough time. There's a beautiful book that some of you might be aware of, and it's by Barbara Carnes. It's a booklet called Gone from My Sight. Now, she talks about signs and symptoms months before a person dies, weeks, days, and hours, all those symptoms. And I'm only mentioning that because, just education regarding, yes, there you go. She has it right there. I had the wonderful opportunity to see her. She was speaking at the VA. This was many, many years ago. She was speaking at the VA, and I'll never forget her. She was a little dynamo. She came out and she kicked her shoes off and she started talking to us about death and dying and all these, she was lighthearted, and it was okay. It was just absolutely beautiful. It was gorgeous. And I'm going to say real quickly that when I was a nurse in Cleveland, Ohio, I worked at university hospitals in Cleveland, and there was a African American woman. She was beautiful. She was trying to get the hospital to accept the music that she was teaching to people who were at the hospital. Not teaching, but she would go play music with them. And after many, many years, she finally got it off the ground. She's renowned. Everybody knows her throughout the world now. Of course, her name just went out of my head, but it was so amazing. She was there when Barbara Carnes was there. So it's just, it's a small world sometimes. So the main goal of hospice. One more thing I wanted to say. So I told you that 40 days is the average length of time, but do you know that people who actually are started on hospice service, they live 29 days longer than a person with the same disease that was not started on service. So, and I think that's because we get their symptoms under control and help them not only physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. It's all those things. So the goal of hospice is to control pain, reduce anxiety, offer spiritual and emotional support, and improve the quality of life, not just for the patient, but also for the family, for friends, for anybody that's involved with that person. So suffering is a human condition, but pain is optional. I always like to say that it's optional. And thank goodness that hospice, that we have a lot of different medications. We have a lot of different ways that we can provide medication to people to get them comfortable. So who pays for hospice? I'm going to talk about who pays for hospice, who qualifies, and where are those services provided. Well, hospice is paid for through Medicare, Medicaid, and other insurances as well. And in general, there are no copays. It's free. And one of the things that I used to have to do is go out and introduce hospice to people that just wanted information about hospice. I worked at a hospice, and I would just go out and I would just talk to them. Sometimes I would have to go back and talk to them 4 or 5 times, but I would just talk to them. And it was pretty amazing. I'll tell you, this one time I told this lady, I said, yes, we could bring out the hospital bed, wheelchair, walker, bedside commode, oxygen. We have this team that comes out. There's a nurse, there's a social worker. We have the clergyman, we have the bath nurse that comes out. And we do that pretty fast. We get all that done pretty fast. And the fifth time I told her about it, she slapped her hand on the table and she said, "We'll take it." It's like she was buying a car. But a lot of people don't realize, that there's a lot of things and you don't have to pay for these things. You don't. I will say, though, at the beginning of hospice, when you're started on hospice, there's a lot of activity right away because within 5 days, the team members want to come out. everybody wants to see you. Everybody wants to know what it is that you need. Can you refuse services? Maybe you don't want a clergyman coming out. Of course you can. Maybe you don't want the social worker coming out. Of course you can do that. This is the person that's going through hospice. This is their show. This is their time. This is their time to be honored. So, okay, so it's paid for, everything's paid for, and even DME, which is durable medical equipment. So diapers, skincare supplies, all of that is taken care of. Wound care supplies. So who qualifies? So if somebody has a life-threatening illness and the doctor has decided that it's reasonable to determine that this person will not be with us 6 months from now, 6 months or less, then that person can be started on hospice. Can that person live longer than 6 months and still qualify? Of course. At the end of each 6-month period, the nurse and the doctor will be reevaluating that patient to see if they're still appropriate for hospice. We did have a lady that was 110 years old one time, and she said she lived to be 110. I asked her, I said, well, how did you live to be 110? She said, I think it was the small bottles of Coca-Cola that I used to drink when I was younger. And it just, something about those bottles of Coca-Cola. So we called the Coke company because we couldn't find the small bottles of Coca-Cola. And actually, when she was drinking it, I think it contained cocaine way back in the beginning. So we found those small bottles of Coca-Cola, and she got better, and we had to take her off. She wasn't off long at all, but she had outlived all of her family. So people can come off, and sometimes people change their mind. They want to go back and get curative therapy. And that's okay. We're not there to talk anybody into staying on hospice. So the other qualification is that a person has to agree that they're no longer going to seek curative therapy. They don't want to go to the hospital anymore. They don't want to get gurney transport to go in anymore to go see their doctor, which is very difficult for them. And then I already said that patients no longer want the curative therapy. And then where does it take place? Anywhere where the patient's at. So it could be in the patient's home. It can be in a board and care. It could be in their apartment. It can be in an assisted living. Wherever that person is at, that's where hospice comes to see them. There are different levels of care. Most people are on routine, but there is continuous home care. There's general inpatient, and there's respite care. I want to tell you, though, that there is a misconception that once you start on hospice, there's going to be people there 24/7 to take care of you. That isn't how it works. Most people, when they first come onto hospice, you might only need to see a nurse once a week. You might not even need a bath nurse to come in and help you. So we just check, see how you're doing, follow up on your symptoms, and then we provide those services when you need it. Okay, so reasons why people don't like hospice, don't like to talk about it. So fear is the number one thing. Fear in my world stands for false evidence appearing real. So a lot of people don't even understand what hospice is, but they don't want to talk about it. So fear of death, fear of dying, not knowing what to expect, difficulty accepting failure regarding the treatment that they were getting. So they might be struggling with that. Misunderstanding of hospice, fear of burdening family members. Well, I can't go on hospice because they're going to think I gave up. And then I have family members saying, I wish they'd let me help them more. So it's just, getting people to come to a place that they both feel comfortable, the family and the patient. Denial is another big thing. And I have to tell you, in hospice, we said denial. Denial is the shock absorber of the soul. Sometimes you're not ready and it takes time. And that's why in the job I was doing, I would go out and talk to people as often as they wanted me to come out and talk to them. We can't rush things, but it is a shock absorber, and it's a very important thing. But sometimes people deny that death is even going to happen. it'll be okay. I don't need to get ready for this. And they need to get ready because they need to get ready for their family and people that are involved with them. Um, they need to give everybody their passwords. They need to give everybody the phone numbers to call the accounts that they have, to get them, to let them know that the person has passed. There's all kinds of things that people don't even think of. Even in your cell phone, I found out that there's a legacy under your security in your iPhone. There's a legacy place in there where you can actually say who you want to get into your phone if you should pass away. And I can talk to you more about that later. So I'm going to wrap it up by saying that dying is the last thing that you teach your family. So we need to do it better. We all need to start doing it better. And hospice does not make death come sooner. Hospice follows the natural progression of the disease while keeping people comfortable. That's what we do. So again, thank you so much for letting me be here and letting me talk to you all.
Oh my
The
goodness.
end.
That was amazing, Karen. Thank you so much.
You're
Yay. That was
welcome.
so good. Boy, I just related. So first of all, that 110-year-old woman, right? Oh my gosh, Coca-Cola. I love that. And I love your the comparison of birth and death. It is that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my gosh, that is so true. I loved how you described this natural process and how we all want to date and just doing the short. I haven't been doing end of life care for a real long time, but that is a common question of when do you think they're going to pass? And it's true about the due date of when we are expecting our baby. It is, and that's when I discovered that time is so precious, right? Like we don't have that much time. There was just a little short video that I saw recently on Instagram, and it was about a gentleman explaining, how old are your parents? And I think the gentleman said they were 74 and 76, and he said, "How often do you see your parents?" And he said, "Twice a year." And he's like, "Well, just assume that they're going to live to 80, so that might, on an average, 5 years. So you get to see your parents 10 more times." And so that really put things into perspective and reminded me of like time is of the essence. And that was just such a good reminder of you explaining, the process of that transitional period and the nesting, trying to prepare. Like if we could just, I say this a lot, but it's like, why do we get so excited about the birth of the baby? The baby's coming. Let's plan, plan, plan. So why don't we embrace death more and just kind of lean into it and be able to truly plan? Because I do think that having a death that is discussed and talked about and planned can really make for a peaceful passing. I've witnessed it, so I believe it to be true. So Karen, thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. Um, I was just going to open it up for questions. I do have a couple questions for you, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So you guys can either raise your hand by using the raise hand button. Um, Maybe let's try that first, just in case there's lots of questions. So does anyone have any questions for Karen? Okay, Karen's got a question.
Thank you, Karen. I love how you had everything succinct in your sharing. I wondered if it would be okay in the chat if I share with everybody. You were talking about Barbara Carnes, and I just became aware of an organization called the daughterhood.org, and they just had Barbara Carnes on as the speaker, and she's actually going to, so if I can share it she did it in the podcast, and then they're actually going to have her live speaking to this group on April the 25th. So I wondered, I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat for everybody, if that's okay.
That's beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. Well, Karen, I'm going to ask a couple questions if it's okay. And so this might trigger some questions for people as well. Um, so one of the questions I get asked a lot about, what's the difference between palliative care and hospice? Because I just ran into this with a client, asking. It's like they felt like they really wanted to consider hospice, but they still were not quite sure. And so one of the questions I had is what is the difference between palliative care and hospice, and can you do both?
In general, yeah, in general, you are doing both when you're in hospice, because if you have pain, we're trying to get it under control, which is palliative. Um, when I first started working in hospice, there was no palliative care. We didn't really address that. We had people that were getting chemotherapy, they were getting curative therapy, and they were in so much pain and had poor quality of life. And there wasn't a program that was offered to them regarding pain management. So that's the difference. So most people who are on that palliative care program, are their focus is curative or just comfort care. They're not ready yet, maybe, to be in hospice. And that is paid for by insurance now. So Medicare, Medicaid, and then palliative care is also covered by Advantage plans. So a lot of insurances are paying for that as well. So any stage of a disease, palliative care can be offered. Mhm.
What about if someone, this came to me recently. Someone had a question about IV fluids and tube feedings. Is that something that is used frequently in hospice? I had someone say that they recently, I saw a visit note come through that said they were wanting some IV fluids. They were worried about dehydration. So how would you answer that question?
That's really a good question, because there's a lot of things that are offered to patients depending on what their symptoms are. The point is we want to keep them comfortable, but we also have to make sure that the body can handle the fluids that we're putting in there. Sometimes the body can't handle it. Sometimes the body can't handle the feeding tubes. And I remember having a conversation with the family, and they were so worried, thinking that they were going to make the death process come sooner if they did not push for that tube to be put in, for a feeding tube. And first thing I always say is, well, what does your mom want? Or what does your dad want? What does the patient want? And a lot of times they don't want that. That's the first thing. The other thing that seems to really help people to explain why tube feeds sometimes can be painful, not always, but sometimes they can be painful. When the body is breaking down, um, it can no longer handle the food. So here's the way I have to put it sometimes, and I did this to a family, there was 5 of them. I said, if you have a car and the engine doesn't work, if you put gasoline in the gas tank, is the engine going to work? And I saw the light bulb kind of come on, like, oh yeah, and I explained, here's Titus. I explained that that it can cause discomfort, it can cause nausea, it can cause vomiting, it can cause constipation. But I will have to tell you that if it's so emotional for the family and so emotional for the patient, there has been times when hospice has gone ahead and used TPN, which is total parenteral nutrition. It's a big bag of vitamins and nutrients that they can give to the patient, or the tube feed. And sometimes, if it's just a short time, they'll go ahead and give the IV fluids. But we have to remember that the body sometimes can't handle it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. One of the questions too that I had, and I wish I would have written it down, but you made a point of it was a choice. Like can you maybe you remember something about suffering and pain, like it's a choice to be in pain. What did you?
Suffering is a human condition. I mean, we all, it might be emotional, it might be physical. We all go through a certain amount of suffering, but pain is optional. I have when we start people on hospice sometimes, and I say I'm not working in hospice right now. I'm a doula, but I mean, I'll always be a hospice nurse, no matter how old I am. But we'll assess the patient's pain, and sometimes they'll say, oh, it's a 5. I'm at a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10, but that's okay. It isn't until we get their pain under control and get it down to a 2 or a 1 that they're like, wow, I didn't realize I was working so hard to control my pain. Like I didn't realize how it was affecting me in all areas of my life. And so it's really important to get pain under control. I'll tell you another story. I had a lady that had been in a concentration camp. So this was a very long time ago, and she had been in a concentration camp when she was a little girl, and we had to put her in the hospital because we couldn't get her pain under control at home. And when I went to see her in the hospital and I said, what would you say your pain is right now? And she looked at me very stoically and a tear was coming down and she said, oh, it's about an 8.
Mm.
And no emotion whatsoever. And I didn't know about the concentration camp, and the nurses on this hospital floor did not believe her because outwardly she looked like she was doing just fine. And they had to start a morphine pump on her to get her pain under control. But it wasn't until I sat there for an hour and I talked to her and I found out that that's where she was from. And you didn't talk about your pain in a concentration camp because you would get punished for that. So, we never know. Pain is whatever that person says it is. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. That's beautiful. Yeah, it is very subjective, isn't it?
It is. And I will say that I've had some family members get upset because once we start mom or dad or whoever in their family on pain medication, there's almost this letting go. Like, oh, I've been fighting against this pain for so long, I can now relax and let go and pass. And they think the medication made them go faster. And that isn't the point. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to keep people comfortable.
You for that. So I really, I've been like thinking about questions to ask. And I think one of the things that the conversation that I had with my mom, she had end stage renal failure. And there are some diagnosis or disease processes that appear to be a little bit more painful than others. And with my mom's case, with her having end stage renal failure, she really it was very easy, it was pretty painless for her. We used minimal medication and she was super comfortable. But she asked that question, is this going to be painful? And she had been holding on. She had fallen several times and she had pain because of these falls. She had several broken ribs, and so she was having pain due to that. But her actually passing away, she seemed very comfortable. And so that's a question I get a lot. Is it painful to die? Is dying painful?
Well, I have never personally experienced um, the actual pain, the actual dying process. Um, it's really hard for me to answer that question because a lot of times what happens if you read Barbara Karn's book is that, people start sleeping more and more, eating less and less, and gradually and slowly, this is what we certainly want, they drift into a coma. Now, if they're in a coma, does it mean they're not in pain? not necessarily. So we're looking at signs and symptoms. If they're fidgety, if they look agitated, if they're grimacing, then we're still going to be giving them pain medication to keep them comfortable. But yeah, it's hard to tell, but I've never seen anybody die like these things you see on TV, on movies, people screaming and yelling while they're dying. I've just never experienced anything like that. And I will tell you something about morphine. I had questions I would get is, and my dad, when he was dying, he would say, am I gonna get hooked on these drugs? Am I gonna be addicted to these drugs? And I would always tell him, Dad, people who get addicted to drugs are people who aren't taking them for the right reasons usually. And or sometimes they were taking them for pain and then I understand that for some chronic condition. But it's interesting with morphine, and it's a wonderful drug that we give, morphine. And it's we keep giving it until we get the pain under control. And I don't know if anybody here knows what the ceiling dose is. Like, what's the highest dose of morphine that we can give? Does anybody know? Well, some of you might know. There is no ceiling dose for morphine. There isn't one. Whatever that person could tolerate. If we need to get them under control. And there's a lot of things that we can do. A person can't eat anymore and they're having nausea and vomiting. We can do suppositories that help with the nausea. We can do pumps that we put a small needle in and it pumps in that medication. There's a lot. There's sublingual medication we can put under the tongue that helps. There's medication that we can give for anxiety. So yeah, there's all kinds of things.
Thank you, Karen. Tina, you have your hand up. Hi.
I pain. I just had a patient that passed November 30th, and he had a glioblastoma. And while he was in the care facility, he fell and aggravated the cancer. And when he was in the hospice hospital, I went to go visit him. You could tell that he was in pain just by the grimacing of his eyes, just he'd close them real tight and just kind of move his head to one certain direction. So you knew the pain was right there. And he passed, what, 4 days later? But he wasn't oh shoot. He was semi-comatose, I guess you'd say, because you could talk to him and he would kind of shake his head up and down or no. So he was definitely hearing and understanding. But you could definitely tell that he was in pain.
I'm sorry that he had to go through that.
Yeah, there was one other thing. I'm not a doula. I've been thinking about becoming a doula. But while I was with this gentleman, I did go see him the day he died. And I had spent 6 months with him, so I got to know him pretty good. I lived with him for a few months. And his niece did not want me around during this process. She wanted it to be a family thing, which I understand. But it still I had become his family too, from, you know, living with him and taking care of him. So I was in that portion where my feelings are getting hurt, but I can't let it bother me, you know, and that I find that portion right there is the hardest.
Mhm. Yeah, if there's dysfunction in the family, it certainly comes out at a time like that, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I even saw it in my own family.
Mhm. It's tricky. It's a dance. It's a dance that we do. Coming in when you have to help out and then backing off, and staying, like we like to use the term, staying in our own hula hoop, backing off because, it's their experience, not ours.
Yeah.
But in hospice, we embrace friends, we embrace neighbors, we embrace anybody who wants to be there and loves the person that is on hospice.
It is definitely one of the hardest things to deal with, that is for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Mm-hmm.
I think we as caregivers grieve too, and just honoring that we experience the loss as well. And there is some form of attachment, that we have because we do, it's a calling. It's not something I don't think, you know, it's just a calling. People are dedicated to this type of work and honor it. And so we really have to honor self-care for us and being able to just detach and, like Karen was saying, staying in our lane, remembering that we have to just honor the loss, creating some kind of ritual and, being able to, what an amazing opportunity for you to care for this gentleman. What a gift. What a gift. So what a
I
gift.
got another question. I mean, when my mom was in the hospital with her stroke, I had tried talking to my dad and my oldest brother, who was the other portion of the medical team, about DNR. My brother flew a flip. He got pissed. Why would I even bring up a DNR? And so I ended up having to have the doctor talk to my dad about the DNR, just so I wouldn't cause more problems in the family. But as you were talking about the person dying and their wishes, that's in the living will, the DNR, but there's so many people that don't even think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And it's interesting what you said about your brother. What I hear you saying is there was fear. Your brother had some fear there.
Mm-hmm.
And when my son was 3 years old, I'll never forget it. We lived in this little community, and he was 3, and those little legs go fast when they're 3. And he got away from me, started running away from me, and he ran out in the middle of the street. There was no cars coming or anything. But my first emotion was fear. He's going to die. When I got my hands on him, it turned to anger, because I was angry that he'd run. But there's a lot of times with things like this, that anger from your brother, underneath that is the fear. So what I usually do, what I've done, I mean, I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but what I've done is, just a lot of times people just need to be heard. They just need to talk it through. But you're right. It's the wishes of the person.
And there's still so much misunderstanding about DNRs, wills, all the legal stuff.
Mhm.
Um, if I go on palliative care or hospice. I mean, palliative care is it's been around for a long time, but hasn't really been getting popular maybe the last 10 years.
Mm.
It started picking up more word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still palliative care is still trying to even find its own footing from what I have seen.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people who don't know about palliative care, but see, this is why Christine has these, death over tea. We're getting better at educating, and there's a lot of death cafes, and I love going to the death cafes because we talk about it at these death cafes about, questions come up about, what do I need to put in my living will, and what is this and what is that, and we're trying, we're really trying hard. And I see some improvement. We're getting there slowly but surely.
And
I know
oh, go ahead.
I know that there's several YouTube videos out there on talking to family members about their wills and their DNRs and all that and death, which I have found to be very informative.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think COVID, I don't know. I wouldn't say COVID is a blessing, but I think COVID in some small way has been a blessing because it has put, public speaking used to be the number one fear, and now it's death, right? But COVID has put death in the spotlight, right? We were all facing it. It was right in our face. We knew people, we saw it on the news. I think that it really has help to kind of motivate people to make arrangements. I think that was another reason why there was just such a surge for death doulas or end-of-life doulas, because people were discovering, like, oh my gosh, this could be me at any minute. And so I think it really kind of acted as a motivator to help us hopefully plan a little easier, or at least make us create these spaces to have opportunities to be able to explore it and discuss it more openly, because it could have happened to any of us. And so if there were any gifts from COVID, I think that was one of them. I think that one, it made people afraid, but it also helped to start some conversations about, wow, that didn't go so well. What can we do better for ourselves? So thank you, Tina. We are coming to the end of our gathering. I hope that you've been able to glean some nuggets from Miss Karen. And I want to thank you again, Karen, for giving us your precious time and sharing what you have shared. How do people get a hold of you? If anyone had any additional questions, what would be the best way to
I'm
reach you?
just taking a picture of what's in the chat right now, so I have it. There we go. The best way to reach me is my email.
Okay.
It's Karen Hunt, HUNT 23 at gmail.com. And I'll give you my phone number as well. 951-317-0211.
So Karen Hunt 23 at gmail.com and phone number 951-317-0211. One of the questions too, Karen, would people be able to do like a teledoula? Like, do you work remotely since
Yes,
you're
I
in
do that too.
California?
So if people have any questions or, just need the help of a doula via Zoom, I'm certainly available to do that.
Perfect, perfect.
On my own Zoom number.
Oh, I'm just thrilled everybody has come to join us. Thank you so much. If I was looking back in trying to figure out how long I've been doing this death over tea. And it was really kind of a creation for me. It was kind of for selfish reasons. I really wanted to have a space so that I could talk safely about death and dying, because I've had my own personal experiences with death with my family and loved ones, and then being a hospice nurse, and then as a new doula. I think, like we were sharing before with Tina, like I'm grieving as well the losses, and really just being able to openly speak about the dying process and my fears and kind of the joy, because I think that it is possible to have extreme grief and sadness, but also feel joy at the same time. And I didn't feel safe about sharing those moments of joy because I felt like I needed to behave a certain way in the grieving process. And so what I've discovered in this process of being able to share space with people is that there's no rules in the dying process, right? There's no rules to grieve. There's no rules on how to behave. There is just grief, and then there is loss. But just really encouraging people to find joy in the moment. That's really where the beautiful magic happens in this lifetime, is just being fully present, because none of us really know when our due date is going to happen. So with every death over tea that I've done now, I've taken upon myself to read a poem. And I know most of you have heard this, but it's just so dear to my heart. And it's from my favorite author, Linda Ellis, and the book is called The Dash. There's a great book with beautiful illustrations in the book, but the poem is called The Dash. So I'm going to close with The Dash. So hopefully you'll leave this on a positive note. So I read of a man who stood to speak at a funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that the first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears, but he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth, and now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things that you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way that other people feel. And be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this little dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things that they said about on how you spent your dash? Thank you, everybody. This was beautiful. Karen, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you for
appreciate
asking me.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
And blessings to all and peace. Thank you.
Thank you.